What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to Not Your Average Meta, an MTG Commander channel dedicated to bringing you decks and commanders you wouldn't normally find in your average meta. This week's video is brought to you by our new channel sponsor, International MTG. If you're looking for competitive pricing on your favorite MTG cards, old and new, be sure to check out the International MTG store and TCG Player, link in the description of this video. This week on Not Your Average Meta, we're bringing you the second game in our New Year's Deck Exchange series that we posted last week in order to showcase our fifth and final deck in the exchange. We'd also like to shout out our second full-time channel sponsor for Season 3, The Hobby Horse. If you're ever in the Central Illinois area, be sure to stop in and check out the store as well as saying hi to Martin. This week's matchup features CJ playing a deck that was built by Foil, being led by Thraximundar. Foil, winner of the game last week, playing a deck built by Fog, being led by Marath, Will of the Wild. Fograll returning, playing a deck built by Gavin, being led by Kenrith, the Return King. And finally Justin playing a deck built by CJ, being led by Old Stickfingers. Now that we have our fighters, let's step into the Thunderdome and see which deck will come out on top. Turn 1, Fog plays a Fabled Passage before cracking to go get an island. Justin plays a Swamp. CG plays a Dismal Backwater, gaining a life. Foil plays a Carplusian Forest. Fog plays a Mountain to cast a Merfolk Seeker Keeper. Justin plays a Forest for turn to cast a Grizzly Salvage. He then reveals the top 5 cards of his library, putting a land into his hand and the rest into his graveyard. CJ plays a Mountain for turn to cast a Torch Courier. He then swings his Courier at Foil for 1 damage. Foil just plays a Forest. Fog plays a Forest and passes. Justin also plays a Forest. CJ plays a Mountain for turn that swings his Courier at Justin for 1 damage. Foil plays a land for turn to cast a Scurry Oak before passing. Fog plays a Swamp to cast Emery Lurker the Lock. He then mills the top 4 cards of his library, putting them into his graveyard. Justin plays a Swamp for turn to cast a Mindwreck Harpy, and each player mills the top 3 cards of their library. CJ plays an Island to cast a Solemn Simulacrum, going to get a land from his library while he passes. Foil takes a damage off his Forge and casts a Welcoming Vampire. The Sin adds a counter to her Scurry Oak, which has him creating a Squirrel token and drawing a card off his Vampire. He then plays a Mountain and passes. Fog plays a Mountain to cast a Harvest Fear, targeting Justin. Justin then discards 2 cards from his hand and draws for turn. Justin plays a Forest and casts his commander Old Stickfingers, where X is equal to 3. He then mills cards off the top of his library until he reveals 3 creature cards, which he then puts into his graveyard. CJ draws and plays an Island before casting a Ruin Wing. Foil casts a Faithless Looting, drawing 2 cards before he then discards 2 cards. He then casts an Evolution Sage, which puts another counter on his Oak, creates another Squirrel token, and draws him another card. Fog plays a Mountain for turn. Justin plays a Swamp to cast a Shamanic Revelation. The Sin has him gaining 4 life and drawing 2 cards. He then goes to combat, which has each player milling 3 cards. CJ casts an Emrakul's Hatcher, which creates him a 0/1 Eldrazi Spawn token. Foil casts his commander Marath, who enters with 3 +1/+1 counters. He then plays a Cabaret Courtyard, which then proliferates the counters, creating him another Squirrel token and draws him another card. He then sacks his Courtyard, which gains him a life and gets him a land, which then proliferates the counters once again, creating him another Squirrel token. Foil then goes to combat and swings a Scurry Oak at Justin, who takes the 5 damage. Fog plays a Plains and pays to cast his commander Kenrith. Justin plays a Forest for turn before he casts a Hornet Queen, which creates him 4 standard Hornet tokens. He then goes to combat and each player mills 3 cards. CJ casts a Slum Reaper for turn, which has each player sacking a creature. Foil then pays to remove a counter from Marath in order to shoot one of Justin's Hornets. Foil plays a Mountain for turn to cast a Commander Sphere before he remembers to proliferate his counters. The Sin creates him another Squirrel token and draws him a card. Foil then casts a Rampant Growth in order to go get another land from his library, which once again proliferates his counters and then creates him another Squirrel token. He then goes to combat, swinging his Marath at Fog and his Oak at CJ. Foil then pays to bounce Marath back to Foil's hand while CJ blocks with his Courier. Foil then pays to shoot Justin's Harpy before he returns Marath back to his hand. Fog draws and casts Once in Future, which then returns a card back to his hand from his graveyard and puts another on top of his library. He then casts Happily Ever After, which has each opponent gaining 5 life and then drawing a card. Fog then replays his Fabled Passage before he cracks it again to go get another land from his library. Justin plays a Forest for turn to cast Casualties of War, which he uses to destroy Foil's Scurry Oak in his Commander Sphere. In response, Foil sacks his Sphere to draw a card. Justin then casts a Skull Prophet and passes. CJ pays to cast his commander Thraximundar before he then swings him at Foil, who sacks a token and blocks with a token. The Sin puts 2 counters on CJ's commander. Foil pays to recast his commander, who enters with 3 +1/+1 counters. He then plays the planes, which proliferates the counters on his commander. He then casts an Impact Tremors before casting a Cultivate. He then goes to put another land into play from his library, which proliferates his counters once again. Fog plays a land for turn that pays to draw a card before he casts Foreboding Fruit, which has him losing 2 life and drawing 2 more cards. Justin draws and casts a Cauldron of Eternity. He then pays 2 life and uses the Cauldron to bring his Harvester of Souls back into play from his graveyard. CJ plays an island that casts Mire and Misery, which makes each player sack a creature. The Sin puts more counters on his commander, and then CJ casts a pair of Swiftfoot Boots before he then pays to equip him to his commander. Foil casts Mechanized Warfare before casting a Faber Elder, dealing a damage to each of his opponents. He then plays a land for turn, which proliferates the counters on his commander. Foil then swings his Vampire Fog for 2 damage. Fog plays another land for turn that casts Treats to Share, creating a food token. Justin plays a Force for turn that casts a Dark Bargain, losing 2 life. He then looks at the top 3 cards of his library, putting 2 of them into his hand. He then casts a Rakshasa Debaser and passes. CJ casts a Dreadhorde Invasion and then a Lightning Skelemental. He then goes to combat and swings a Skelemental and commander at Foil. Foil then sacks a token before blocking his commander with another token. He then casts a Naya Charm in order to deal 3 damage to the Skelemental, putting more counters on CJ's commander. Foil casts an Unbound Flourishing, then plays a land for turn, proliferating the counters on his commander. Foil then swings his Vampire Fog again, who then pays to gain 5 life before he takes the 2 damage. Fog casts a Spectre Shriek, targeting CJ. CJ then chooses to counter the spell with a cancel, and Fog then casts his Curious Pair from their adventure. Justin draws and casts Lorcan Warlock Collector. CJ loses a life on his upkeep and amasses an army. He then draws for turn and plays the Bloodfilled Caves, gaining a life. CJ then casts a Chain Devil in order to make each player sack a creature. Foil sacks his Faber Elder, which puts more counters on CJ's commander, and also has Justin drawing a card off his Harvester trigger. In response, Fog pays to gain 5 more life and draw a card. Each player then sacks a creature, which puts more counters on Thraximundar and has Justin drawing multiple cards. Justin then pays 5 life to put CJ's Emrakul Hatcher into play under his control. Foil then casts Unbound Potential in order to put +1/+1 counters on his Vampire and his commander. CJ then goes to combat, swings his commander at Foil, who sacks another token before blocking with his Evolution Sage, which then adds more counters to CJ's commander. Foil casts a Chain Reaction in order to wipe the board, and in response, he pays to remove 6 counters from his commander to create enough tokens to deal 12 damage to each of his opponents. The spell then resolves and all the creatures get wiped off the board, which has Justin drawing a large amount of cards while CJ draws 1. Fog draws and pays to recast his commander a second time. Justin pays to cast a Dawnglade Regent, which has him becoming the Monarch, before he then casts an Explorer, which has him drawing another card and playing a land for turn. He then pays to use his Cauldron and mistakenly brings his Hornet Queen back into play, which would actually be on the bottom of his library. CJ plays an island for turn that remembers to lose a life and amass an army token. He then pays to recast his commander before he then re-equips them with the boots. Foil pays to also recast his commander, who enters with 7 +1/+1 counters before he casts an Arcane Signet. Fog draws and plays an island before he casts a Questing Beast, and Justin realizes that all the creatures that died should actually be on the bottom of his library. Fog then goes to combat and swings both his creatures at Justin, who responds by casting a Putrefy, which then gets countered by Fog's Mesmeric Glare. Justin then blocks Kenrith, and in response, Fog pays to draw a card, and Justin takes 4 damage, which then has Fog becoming the Monarch. Fog then aggressively takes the Monarch token from Justin before drawing on his instep and passing turn. Justin plays a Swamp for turn that casts a Terrestodon, which he uses to destroy 2 of Foil's enchantments. Foil then responds by removing enough counters to shoot Justin's Regent, but in response, Justin destroys Foil's Mechanized Warfare with the Beast Within. Justin then casts his own Arcane Signet and passes. CJ amasses again on his upkeep and loses a life before he then draws for turn. He then casts a Riot of Bells Unlock, creating 2 0/1 Cleric tokens, and a Thatcher Revolt, which has him creating 3 Hasty Human tokens. He then makes a deal with Fog to deal 1 damage to him in order to become the Monarch, before his tokens then die and he draws on his instep. Foil plays a Canopy Vista for turn that pays to remove the counters from Marath in order to create a 3/3 Elemental token. He then pays to recast Marath once again, who enters with 10 +1/+1 counters. Fog draws and gets on the Arcane Signet party before he then casts Haggle in order to discard a card and then draw a card. He then also casts a Rider in Need to create a 2/2 Knight token and passes. Justin casts a Thieving Amalgam and uses his Cauldron to bring his Fiend Artisan back into play from his graveyard. On his upkeep, CJ gives Justin the top card of his library before he amasses 1, loses a life, draws for turn, and then uptakes his Saga to create more Cleric tokens. Foil flings his top card of his library at Justin before he then draws for turn and passes. On his upkeep, Fog gives Justin the top card of his library. He then draws for turn and plays a Castle Embereth before he recasts Kenrith the 3rd time. He then pays to cast Hypnotic Sprite before passing. Justin plays a Forest and casts a Dreadhound. He then pays to cast Fog, Smith, and Swordmaster before remembering he's supposed to mill 3 cards. On his upkeep, CJ gently hands Justin the top card of his library before drawing for turn and forgetting how magic phases work. He then casts a card and takes it back before uptaking his Saga to create a demon token and remembering you're supposed to once again amass and lose a life on his upkeep. On his instep, Foil pays to Chaos Warp Justin's Amalgam. This then has him shuffling the Amalgam into his library while he casts a Solidarity of Heroes to double the counters on his commander. Justin then reveals the top card of his library, which happens to be a Sepekal Primordial, which is arguably worse than the Amalgam. This then is Justin taking a creature from each player's graveyard to put into play. CJ's Chain Devil then has each player sacking a creature, and in response, Foil pays to shoot Justin's Dreadhound. In response to that, Justin targets the Dreadhound with a Reincarnation, which Foil responds to by casting it back to nature to exile the Enraged Forerunner from Justin's graveyard. Foil then pays to remove the last counters off his commander, shooting Justin for 2 damage. On his instep, Fog pays to gain 5 life and then draws for turn. He then casts his Merchant of the Veil from its adventure before casting a Seasoned Ritual for a green mana. Turn 1, Fog plays a Fabled Passage. Justin draws for turn to cast an Overseer of the Damned, which he uses to destroy CJ's Demon token. He then goes to combat, swinging his Vampire CJ for 2 damage in order to become the Monarch once again. Justin then draws on his instep and passes. CJ pays to crack his Fear on Justin's instep in order to go get 2 lands to put into play. He then amasses 1 and loses a life before drawing for turn. CJ then casts a Parcel Mirror and passes. Foil draws and pays to recast his commander again, who enters play with 13 +1/+1 counters. On his instep, Fog uses Kenrith's ability to bring his Foulmire Knight into play from his graveyard. This then allows Fog to meet all the qualifications for Happily Ever After, thus winning him the game on his upkeep. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you can see more games and decks you wouldn't normally see in your average meta.